Well, howdy folks, bluesboyjag here, walking at Emerald Park again. Nice and tranquil, beautiful day. It's been raining here, it seems like for 5 years, non-stop. This is about 3 minutes from my house in North Little Rock, Arkansas. So I thought I'd talk to you today about Elixir strings. Elixir is a brand of string, guitar string, that is coated. And it's coated for 2 reasons: for durability and also for ease of use, which means easier to play. Now, there's been it's been a little bit of a controversy about Elixir strings over the years. A few years ago, I posted something on Facebook, I believe, about how I like the Elixir strings, and I got bombarded with a whole slew of people saying they're horrible, I hate them. And these days it's not quite so one-sided. In fact, I just did a little bit of reading up on the internet. I came across a link and someone was asking about their opinion of Elixir strings, and I read some of the responses, expecting to see a whole bunch of people trashing and yelling and screaming about how horrible Elixir strings were. Check out this. To change the subject just for a bit, there's a tugboat right there in the Arkansas River, moving real slow. Actually, not quite sure he's moving at all. It's always hard to tell if they're moving or not because they move so slow. Anyway, I thought there'd be a whole bunch of people trashing Elixir strings, but it turns out to be the exact opposite. Out of the, I don't know, 100 or so people who commented, literally 95% of them love the Elixir strings. So I thought I'd talk about what they are. So for those of you not familiar, they're coated strings, which in a nutshell makes them slippery. And some people don't like the slipperiness, but I love it because it makes it easier to play. Back in the day, when I was first starting to play, and I didn't have a whole lot of money, I was just a kid, so I'd have to use old strings for a while. So I'd get a set of strings, and I played so much that within a week they were losing their tone, but I didn't know any better, so I kept on playing. So by the time I started gigging a few years later, I would change strings constantly, not because they're broke necessarily, but because they got to be kind of sticky and they were hard to play. Plus you could hear your fingers sliding up and down the strings, especially when you had cranked up distorted rock and roll guitar. And so at some point I got wind of Elixirs when I lived in Austin, I guess about 2000 or so, something like that. And I thought I'd give them a try. They are more expensive, but man, I highly recommend them. A, because they're easy to play. B, because most people, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong here, don't use a pick on a 3-string because the neck is so skinny it's hard to strum. And that might seem kind of funny to some of you beginners out there, but we'll leave that discussion for another time. So the strings, the Elixir strings, because most people use their fingers, myself included, on a cigar box guitar, you're sliding up and down the fretboard a lot. On a 6-string, not so much, because you can play a whole bunch of chords all over the place on a 6-string. So you don't have to jump up and down the fretboard as much, unless you want to, and get different chord inversions and so forth. But a regular 6-string guitar, you'll be jumping around a lot, and that slows you down, especially on strings that are kind of sticky. And plus you get all that noise of your finger, especially if you have your guitar cranked up with a lot of distortion. You can hear your finger kind of sliding on the strings. Most of the time it doesn't bother me, but every now and then I might hear it, and it might kind of go, eugh. So I tried the Elixirs and I fell in love with them. I've been using them ever since. They last a long time because they're coated. I mean a long time. I mean several long times. I mean, a couple dozen long times. Normally a quote cheap uncoated set of strings, if I play, I practice every couple of days and I play gigs every few days, a cheap set might last me a week. Lots of bending, and I give my guitar a pretty good workout. And the Elixirs last literally 2 or 3 months, no joke. And that's because they're coated, so they're protected. And also you don't hear your fingers sliding across the strings nearly as much. The tone is great. The tone, I can't tell any difference between the Elixirs and the non-Elixirs, or the regulars, as far as the tone. So I recommend the Elixir strings for sure. Now, if you play, you don't have to play a whole lot or play a lot of gigs to recognize the positive aspects of the Elixir coated strings. For those of you who don't play as much as I do, those strings might even last you 6 months or a year, depending on how much you play. Now, I've used Elixirs sometimes so long that I forget. I got several guitars, and I don't take notes and write down when I change the strings. I change the strings when they start sounding bad. And I've literally been playing Elixir strings sometimes for so many months that they'll just break. So I have to kind of keep a mental note on the different guitars. Now, as far as gigging guitars, I always change the strings before a gig. I don't care if I put the strings on 2 weeks ago. I'll change the strings because you don't want a string breaking in mid-set. But I'm definitely endorsing Elixir strings. I haven't officially endorsed them on the website or anything like that. Nobody knows who the heck I am. But I'm telling you that I do endorse them for that reason. So the other thing about the different strings that you use on a cigar box guitar is there's only 3 strings or 4 strings on most cigar box guitars. A lot of people use 6s, but the vast majority have 3 or 4, and the vast majority have 3, which means you're going to be playing those 3 strings a lot. On a 6 string, you may not play a whole lot on a 6 string, right? Unless you do a bar chord here and there, and maybe a low E blues lick down there. Other than that, you're really concentrating on the 5, 4, 3, 2 strings, because that's where most of the chords are on a 6 string. So when you play a cigar box guitar, you're playing all the strings. You're giving every single string a heavy workout in just, 30 minutes of playing, because there's only 3 strings, right? And you can't do as many chord inversions. Well, you can, but you're still using the same 3 strings. So if you play your A chord down low, you can take that A chord and do a chord inversion further up. You're still using the same strings to make that chord. So 3 string CBGs, the strings get a heavy workout, whereas a 6, not quite so much. So 6s will last longer. So if anything, it's better for sure to use coated strings on a CBG for that reason, especially if you're using your fingers to do a lot of the picking, which brings up another subject. I know I've talked about this a lot, but check out my videos and you'll see that I don't use a pick at all. And it's because I have more control playing the melody and the chords with my fingers. Now, I know a lot of you beginners don't want to hear that, but it really is true. The cigar box guitar, especially the 3 string, you're going to be using a lot of different chords all up and down the neck. And a pick is just difficult to play those chords because there's only 3 strings. It's kind of hard to explain if you haven't been playing guitar for a while, but it's easier to use a pick on a 5 or 6 string than it is on a 3. Therefore, your fingers are going to be really giving the strings a workout, and the oil on your fingers and so forth will make the strings kind of grungy, and over time they won't sound as bright. So I highly recommend the Elixir strings for those reasons. So the other thing is, people ask me a lot about the different brands of electric guitar strings that are not coated, and they ask me which ones I prefer, and it really comes down to your preference, but most of them are all the same. The way I understand it is a lot of the manufacturers, or the different brands, are made by the same manufacturer. Not all of them, but a lot of them. I used to swear off of using the cheap ones on my CBG, because back in the day when I played electric guitar, the cheap ones would break a lot. And I've come to realize that I'm only using a 3-string CBG, so the strings aren't that heavy. Aren't that light. The first string is a 3rd string, so chances of that one breaking within 6 months or a year is pretty slim. I've got some CBGs that still sound great with strings on that have been on them for 2 or 3 years. Now, granted, I don't play those every day, but I do play them multiple times a month, so that's a pretty long time. So I hope this helps you out as far as the strings. I know that's a very exciting subject, so take a look at this exciting subject right here. I don't know if you can see it, but we've got the downtown area coming up here. I'm going progressively higher up the mountain here, walking up the super easy paved road here. This is downtown Little Rock, and that's the Arkansas River. Let's just take a little close-up gander here. That's what they say in Arkansas, gander. And I got about 5 more minutes to go before I maybe 10 or 15 before I turn around and come back, get my exercise in. Otherwise I get stove up, and if I don't have guitars to make, then I'm sitting on my butt promoting the business on the internet, and sitting is not good. So I'm actually thinking about maybe getting a bench where I can stand and use my computer from time to time. So if I'm doing a whole lot of Facebook promotion and creating ads and so forth, then I can do that while I'm standing. That way I won't be sitting on my butt for hours. I'm already feeling a little bit looser, which, that brings up another thought. Don't laugh, but I really recommend, I don't care how young you are or how old you are, check out that. There's a tugboat down there, and a picnic area down there. What I was going to say, though, was I recommend that when you practice your guitar, I recommend you stand up when you play. And the main reason for that is, if you're a gigging musician, this might sound funny, but you need to be practicing in the same stance that you are when you're performing. So when you, for instance, if you write a book, and this might sound kind of off the subject, but if you write a book while you're driving and you dictate it, let's say, to a recording, then you're doing 2 things at once, but your brain can kind of do both things at the same time. If you're playing guitar, you need to be playing standing up, because if you gig, you're going to be standing up more than likely. Now, if you sit when you play a gig, I guess that's a different story. But what I'm getting to here is, if you stand when you play a gig, you need to stand when you rehearse. And if you sit when you play a gig, you need to sit when you rehearse. You need to have the same stance and same posture. I've learned a whole bunch of songs, especially back in the early days, sitting down. And then my buddies would come over a few days later and we'd be standing up, and it felt totally different. And I was making mistakes because the neck was slightly further away from my hand, or the neck was lower slung with my strap. So you need to figure out where you like that strap set up, and if you like to play standing up or sitting down. As far as gigs, if you play gigs standing up, you need to practice standing up. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that every single time you pick up the guitar, and as you get, if you're a beginner or intermediate, you'll get to the point where it's not quite as important, but I still recommend doing that. So I hope this helps, just kind of giving you some information about a couple different things that popped into my head when I was driving up here. I wasn't necessarily planning on doing a video up here, but every time I start walking, I get bored. So I figure might as well go ahead and do a video. So I hope that helps. Keep the cards and letters coming. I appreciate all your support. I've been getting a whole lot of comments and requests, which is fantastic. Keep those questions coming too. I'm getting personal questions into my inbox about guitars and CBGs and my preferences and so forth. So keep all those things coming. Subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out my website, jagshouse.com, JAGSHOUSE.com. Cigar Box Guitar since 2004. And remember, if your name is Cliff, do not cross this point if you're dangerous.